Imagine this scenario. You're out watching, say, a magnificent llama, maybe an alpaca, or even a deer. They seem totally fine, just grazing peacefully. Then maybe they get startled, or you try to move them, and suddenly tremors start. They begin to stagger, just completely losing coordination. It's quite dramatic, and it's a neurological condition that honestly most people haven't really heard much about. So today, that's exactly what we're doing, a deep dive into this condition. It's called Ryegrass Staggers. We're focusing specifically on how it affects camelidae, camels, llamas, alpacas, and also cervidae, so various deer species. Our mission here is to give you a shortcut, basically, to getting well informed about what causes it, how it hits these animals, and really importantly, how we can prevent it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've sifted through quite a bit of material, detailed scientific papers, a comprehensive veterinary review, pulling out the key stuff for you.
Yeah, and what's really striking, I think, is that this isn't just, oh, the animal ate a bad plant. It's way more complex. It's this intricate interaction, a kind of biological deal between common grass, a hidden fungus living inside it, and the animal that eats it. Much more nuanced than just blaming the grass.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Ryegrass staggers, fundamentally, it's a neurological condition. It affects grazing animals, and it comes from them eating perennial ryegrass, the scientific name being Lolium peren. But here's the twist. The grass itself isn't the direct cause.
Exactly. That's the crucial point. The real culprit is a microscopic fungus, an endophyte. Its current name is Epicloe festucivar lolia. You might see an older name, Neotyphodium lolii, in some of the literature, but it's the same organism. And this fungus lives inside the grass tissues, completely hidden. It's a symbiotic relationship.
So because it's caused by a fungus toxin, it's actually what's the term? A mycotoxicosis.
Precisely. A microtoxicosis, poisoning from fungal toxins. And it's fascinating because this fungus actually helps the ryegrass. It gives it benefits like better resistance to insects, maybe better drought tolerance, good for the plant's survival.
A natural bodyguard, kind of?
Sort of, yeah. But the downside, the double-edged sword, is that it produces these potent neurotoxins. And the main one we're concerned with for the staggers is called lolitrem B.
Lolitrem B, got it. Okay, and this next detail feels really important for understanding the risk.
Right.
Where is this toxin in the plant?
Right. It's not evenly distributed. It's highly concentrated down low in the lower leaf sheaths near the base of the plant and also in the seed heads.
So animals grazing pastures really short down to the stubble, they're getting the highest dose.
Exactly. That's when it becomes particularly dangerous. It's not just what they eat, but how much of the base they're forced to consume.
Okay, so we've got the fungus, the toxin lolitrem B, concentrated low down. Now, how does this toxin actually cause those, well, staggering symptoms? What's happening in the brain?
Yeah, so the mechanism is quite specific. Lolitrem B disrupts normal nerve signaling, the neurotransmission, in the central nervous system. It acts as a potent tremorgen, something that causes tremors. And scientifically, it does this by inhibiting certain ion channels in nerve cells.
Ion channels, like little gates controlling nerve signals.
Pretty much. Specifically, large conductance calcium-activated potassium channels, often just called BK channels.
DK channels, okay.
Now, these BK channels are really important. They help regulate how excitable neurons are. Think of them like a reset button. After a neuron fires, these channels help bring it back to its resting state, ready to fire again appropriately.
So you prevent the nerve cell from just firing uncontrollably.
Exactly. Lolitrem B essentially blocks or jams that reset button so the neuron can't properly repolarize. It stays hyperexcitable. This leads directly to that uncontrolled nerve firing, which manifests physically as muscle tremors, in coordination, the staggers. It's like a circuit breaker that fails, causing a short circuit.
That makes sense. It explains the physical symptoms. Now, you mentioned earlier it's often reversible. Is that usually the case?
Generally, yes. The good news is that if you remove the animal from the source of the toxin, the affected pasture, the effects usually wear off as the toxin clears the system.
But I think you also hinted that sometimes it can cause permanent damage.
Yes, that's the serious caveat. With severe symptoms or critically prolonged exposure, if they keep eating the toxic grass for too long, there can be lasting neurological damage. It really depends on the dose and duration. It becomes a race against time.
Right. So which animals are we most concerned about? We mentioned Camelidae.
Yes, llamas and alpacas are known to be highly susceptible. Camels, too, but llamas and alpacas seem particularly sensitive.
Why is that? Is it something about their biology or?
Well, a couple of factors are likely involved. One might be a lack of evolutionary exposure, meaning their bodies just haven't adapted defenses against these specific fungal toxins compared to, say, sheep, that might have coexisted with these grasses longer.
And their grazing habits, you mentioned grazing low.
Exactly. They often graze very close to the ground, getting right down into that base where the lolitrem bee is concentrated. Some studies even suggest alpacas might be more sensitive than sheep or cattle on the very same pasture.
Wow. And young ones are particularly vulnerable. Crias.
Yes. Young animals, crias, and weanlings definitely seem to be at higher risk or show signs more readily.
Okay, what about the deer family, the Cervidae? You mentioned elk, wapiti.
Right. Ryegrass staggers is definitely recognized in deer, both wild and farmed. There's variability there too. Wapiti or North American elk are considered highly susceptible.
More so than other deer.
Generally, yes. Red deer and fallow deer seem moderately susceptible. It might relate partly to their natural diet. Wapiti, for instance, naturally eat a lot more browse shrubs, twigs. So if you confine them to pastures that are mostly ryegrass, they might be forced to eat more of it than is natural, increasing their risk compared to, say, red deer, which might be more adapted grazers.
And for both groups, camelids and cervids, there's a specific time of year when this is worst.
Yes, the highest risk period is typically late summer and early autumn.
When the grass is dying back.
Exactly. Pastures get drier, sparser. Animals are forced to graze closer to the ground, eating those toxin-rich lower parts, and potentially seed heads if they're present. It all comes back to that concentration.
So let's talk about what it actually looks like, the clinical signs. You said they range from mild to severe.
They do, and they're quite consistent across the different species, which helps in recognizing the pattern.
Some mild signs might be?
You might just see subtle things, fine muscle tremors, maybe just the head and neck twitching slightly, or sometimes an intermittent head nodding. In deer, it might start with just a bit of trembling in the neck and shoulder muscles. Easy to miss if you're not looking closely.
But it can get much worse.
Oh, definitely. As it progresses, you see the characteristic staggering, uncoordinated gait. It's called ataxia. Often they have this weird high-stepping walk.
Hypermetria, is that the term?
Yes, hypermetria. They might stand with their legs wide apart trying to keep their balance. They stumble a lot. And in severe cases, they just can't stay upright.
They fall.
They fall frequently, might struggle or be completely unable to get up. You can even see convulsions, thrashing, or severe muscle rigidity like tetanic spasms. It's very distressing to witness.
And you mentioned something really key earlier about excitement making it worse.
Absolutely crucial for diagnosis. The signs are dramatically worse when the animal is stressed, excited, or forced to move.
So an animal could look almost normal just standing quietly.
And then you try to hurt it, or there's a sudden noise and it just collapses, or the tremors become really violent. That response to stress is a hallmark sign. It means you really need to observe them calmly first.
It's not just the obvious staggering, though.
Yeah.
Are there other, maybe less dramatic effects?
Yes, there are broader impacts, even subclinical effects, like maybe just weight loss because they're not grazing efficiently, or what vets call ill thrift, just generally doing poorly, not thriving. You might also see increased sensitivity to heat, potential impacts on fertility, even pregnancy loss has been associated with it. In farm deer, it can hit productivity, lower growth rates in young stock, reduce velvet antler production in stags.
So it really affects their whole system.
It does. And there's a really important welfare point here, too. Often, the actual cause of death isn't the toxin directly poisoning them in a lethal dose sense.
It's accidents.
Yes, it's misadventure, as the vets call it. Because they're so uncoordinated, they get tangled in fences, they might fall into water troughs or dams and drown, or they might bloat if they're down and can't move properly. Their inability to cope with simple hazards becomes fatal.
That's tragic. Okay, so if a vet suspects ryegrass staggers, how do they confirm it? You mentioned the signs and the history.
Right. Diagnosis often starts with those characteristic clinical signs. Combined with the history, are they grazing perennial ryegrass, especially during that late summer-autumn high-risk period?
But for a definite answer.
For confirmation, lab tests are needed. You can actually measure the lolitrem B levels in the pasture grass itself, or sometimes in feed samples if they're being supplemented. Testing the ryegrass for the presence of the endophyte fungus is also key.
And you mentioned a scoring system for camelids.
Yeah, some researchers have developed neurological scoring systems, particularly for llamas and alpacas, to help grade the severity of the signs objectively.
Interesting. Is there anything found after death, post-mortem, that points specifically to this?
In cases that have gone on for a while, particularly in deer, yes. Microscopic examination of the brain, specifically the cerebellum, can show characteristic damage. You see these specific swellings on the nerve cell axons, the Purkinje cells. They look like little torpedoes under the microscope, these eosinophilic swellings. Finding those is strong evidence for Ryegrass Staggers.
Torpedoes.
Yeah.
Vivid name. Okay, so let's talk treatment. Is there an antidote, a specific drug?
Unfortunately, no. That's the tough part. There is no specific antidote or medication that directly counteracts lolitrem B.
So what do you do?
The absolute first and most critical step is removal. Get the affected animals off the toxic pasture immediately. Stop the intake of the toxin. That's priority number one.
Makes sense. Eliminate the source, then what?
Then it's all about supportive care. Provide fresh, clean water. Offer good quality, safe feed hay, or alternative forages like clover, lucerne, maybe brassicas depending on the species and what's available, something that doesn't have the endophyte.
And keeping them calm, since stress makes it worse.
Exactly. Minimize handling, minimize stress as much as humanly possible. Keep them in a quiet, safe environment where they can't injure themselves easily.
And for the ones that are down, that can't get up.
For those severe recumbent animals, intensive supportive care is vital. Preventing those secondary problems we talked about, dehydration, starvation, drowning, bloating, pressure sores, it might involve helping them stand periodically if possible, ensuring easy access to food and water.
What's the outlook usually, if you get them off the pasture quickly and provide that care?
The prognosis is generally good, thankfully. If they're removed promptly, most animals recover. Signs usually start to improve within a few days and resolve over days to weeks.
How long typically?
Maybe a few days to 2 weeks for camelids, perhaps 1 to 3 weeks for cervids, roughly. Once the exposure stops, the body can clear the toxin.
But recovery isn't always guaranteed.
Severe cases might take longer, and as we discussed, if the exposure was really prolonged or severe, some permanent neurological deficits are possible, though less common if managed quickly.
So given there's no cure, prevention really is key here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Prevention is by far the most effective strategy. Much better to avoid the problem in the first place.
And how do you do that? What are the main strategies?
A lot revolves around pasture management. A big one is using endophyte-free ryegrass varieties when you're seeding new pastures or renovating old ones.
So grass without the fungus.
Yes. Or there are also novel or safe endophytes being developed. These are strains of the fungus that still give the grass some benefits, like insect resistance, but they produce very little or none of the harmful lolitrem B toxin.
That sounds like a good compromise. What else?
Basic good grazing management helps too. Things like pasture rotation so animals aren't continuously grazing the same infected area down to the nub.
Avoiding overgrazing, especially during those risky times.
Crucial. Avoiding that really short grazing prevents them from eating those high toxin basal parts of the plant. Leaving a bit more residual pasture helps dilute the toxin intake.
Does giving other feed help?
Yes. Supplemental feeding is another good strategy. Providing hay, silage, or other safe forage dilutes the proportion of toxic ryegrass in their total diet.
And testing the grass.
Definitely recommended, especially if you know you have high endophyte ryegrass. Testing pasture samples for endophyte levels and, ideally, low lolitrem B concentration, particularly heading into that high-risk late summer-autumn period, can give you a warning.
So it really requires active management from farmers or landowners.
It does. It raises that important question for anyone managing these animals. How do you best balance the benefits of ryegrass, which can be a very productive grass, with the risks of the endophyte? It involves integrating these strategies.
Now, when an animal shows neurological signs, it might not always be ryegrass staggers, right? Are there other things it could be mistaken for?
Oh, absolutely. Differential diagnosis is critical. Vets have to consider other conditions that can cause similar signs like tremors, staggering, or falling.
Like what, for example?
Well, there's grass staggers, which sounds similar but is totally different. That's hypomagnesemia, low magnesium, a metabolic issue, not a toxin.
Okay.
Then there's polioencephalomalacia, often called PEM. That's a neurological disease usually linked to thiamine deficiency or sometimes sulfur toxicity. It can cause blindness, seizures, pressing the head against things.
Different signs, but still neurological.
Exactly. In deer especially, you have to consider chronic wasting disease, CWD. That's a fatal prion disease, causes weight loss, poor coordination, listlessness, but it's progressive over a longer time usually.
Right, CWD is a big concern in deer populations.
And of course, there are various other plant toxicities that can cause neurological signs or even infectious diseases like listeriosis, which can cause circling, head tilt, facial paralysis.
So getting the history, checking the pasture, maybe doing specific lab tests, it's all part of solving the puzzle.
Precisely. You need the whole picture. The clinical signs, the animal's history, what's in the pasture, maybe blood tests or post-mortem findings to confidently distinguish ryegrass staggers from these other possibilities.
Okay, so wrapping this up then. Ryegrass staggers. It's caused by that hidden fungus, epicloe, producing the neurotoxin lolitrem B in perennial ryegrass.
Right, and it's a significant neurological threat, especially for those highly susceptible llamas, alpacas, and deer like wapiti. Those dramatic symptoms, especially getting worse with stress, are the big red flags.
And the key takeaway on management. No specific cure exists. So getting animals off the toxic pasture immediately, providing supportive care, and focusing on prevention through smart pasture management are absolutely vital.
It's all about minimizing exposure and managing the risk proactively.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, whether you work with these animals directly or you're passionate about wildlife conservation, or maybe you're just curious about how the natural world works, understanding this complex interaction, the grass, the fungus, the animal, it really empowers you. You're better informed about these subtle, sometimes hidden, environmental factors that can profoundly impact animal health.
It's a fascinating example of symbiosis gone wrong from the animal's perspective.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How many other plants that seem perfectly ordinary, like ryegrass, might be hiding these kinds of biological secrets, these complex relationships with fungi or bacteria that could have major impacts on animal health, maybe even human health? What other silent symbiotic partnerships are out there, shaping our ecosystems and the health of everything within them in ways we're only just beginning to appreciate? Something to ponder.